On August 6, 1945, a single flash over Hiroshima erased a city in seconds. This apocalyptic detonation brought the deadliest conflict to a sudden close. But to understand how humanity reached a point of total annihilation, we have to rewind. Look at this photograph from 1919. In the Grand Halls of Versailles, global delegates gathered to sign a peace treaty ending the First World War. Buried inside that document was Article 231, known as the War Guilt Clause. It forced Germany to accept total blame for the conflict and pay crippling financial reparations to the victors. The agreement was sold to the public as the peace to end all wars. Instead, it engineered the exact economic collapse and bitter resentment required to start a second, even larger one. You can see the immediate result of those reparations in this image. By 1923, German currency was experiencing hyperinflation. Money was so worthless that children used massive bundles of cash as building blocks, and a single loaf of bread cost billions of marks. When the global Great Depression hit in 1929, the already fragile German economy shattered completely, leaving millions starving and unemployed. This level of desperation creates a dangerous political vacuum. A charismatic politician named Adolf Hitler stepped into that void, capturing the public's attention by promising to restore national pride and rebuild a racially pure empire. He quickly took absolute control of the government and began secretly rebuilding the German military, directly violating the Versailles Treaty. Britain and France, traumatized by the carnage of the First World War, looked the other way in a diplomatic strategy known as appeasement. By prioritizing temporary diplomatic comfort over immediate intervention, the global community allowed a heavily armed, radicalized state to grow entirely unchecked. That unchecked growth culminated here in September 1939. As German soldiers physically tore down the Polish border gates, Britain and France finally exhausted their patience and declared war. The defending armies expected a slow, muddy repetition of World War I. Instead, Germany unleashed Blitzkrieg, or lightning war, a military doctrine built on the rapid coordination of armored tanks and overwhelming air superiority. Fueled by chemical stimulants, German forces steamrolled across Western Europe in weeks. You can see the desperation in this photo. Hundreds of thousands of Allied troops trapped against the sea at Dunkirk, waiting for a chaotic rescue. France surrendered shortly after. Britain stood entirely alone. As you can see in this photograph of a ruined cityscape, they endured a relentless aerial bombardment campaign known as the Blitz, which reduced massive swaths of London to smoking rubble. The static trenches of the previous generation were gone. This was a fast, highly mechanized slaughter, and initially, no defending nation had the strategy or the speed to stop it. Then, in 1941, Hitler made a fatal strategic error. He broke a non-aggression pact with Joseph Stalin. Looking at this photograph of German vehicles advancing across the open plains, you can see the sheer scale of the force he sent to invade the Soviet Union. Halfway across the globe, an expansionist Japanese empire was feeling the squeeze of United States oil sanctions. Their response is captured in this image, a surprise aerial strike that decimated the American fleet at Pearl Harbor. That single morning in Hawaii immediately pulled the United States into the fight, fusing a series of regional European and Asian conflicts into a singular, interconnected global struggle. This massive scale required the complete mobilization of entire empires. In this photo, you see Indian soldiers receiving weapons training. Over 2 million colonial troops from India fought for the British crown, battling far from their own homes. Pulling raw materials and grain away from colonial territories to feed the war machine had devastating indirect consequences. In 1943, resource diversion contributed to a catastrophic famine in Bengal, killing up to 3 million civilians. This was the brutal reality of total war. Battlefields were no longer restricted to front lines. Every citizen, every factory, and every acre of agricultural yield on Earth was now a fiercely contested military resource. The Axis momentum finally broke in the east. Look closely at this total devastation. This is Stalingrad. Through months of savage street fighting, the Soviet Red Army surrounded and annihilated the German forces, halting their advance entirely. Meanwhile, the Western Allies opened a new front with D-Day. As you can see from this landing craft, thousands of American, British, and Canadian troops waded directly into hostile machine gun fire to reclaim the beaches of northern France. In the Pacific, the United States shattered the Japanese naval advantage at the Battle of Midway. Navigating through the dense fields of anti-aircraft fire shown here, American bombers sank 4 Japanese carriers, triggering a relentless island-hopping campaign toward the Japanese mainland. By coordinating their attacks across multiple fronts, the Allied nations leveraged their combined industrial might and raw manpower to simply outpace the Axis powers' ability to defend their stolen territories. By the spring of 1945, Soviet forces had completely encircled Berlin. With his empire reduced to rubble, Adolf Hitler committed suicide in an underground bunker, and Germany surrendered. Japan, however, refused to yield. To avoid a costly ground invasion of the Japanese mainland, the United States deployed a horrifying new technology, dropping 2 atomic bombs on the cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Japan's swift surrender ended the fighting, but it left behind a staggering toll. Between 60 and 80 million people were dead. European infrastructure was obliterated, and as Allied troops liberated the concentration camps, the systematic, industrial-scale horrors of the Holocaust were fully exposed to the world. The global map was instantly redrawn. Old European empires began to fracture and dissolve. Germany was split in half, and as shown in this photograph of a massive international assembly, the United Nations was formed to prevent such a catastrophe from ever happening again. World War II destroyed the old imperial system, but it immediately birthed a polarized new reality. Out of the ashes of the conflict, the United States and the Soviet Union emerged as the sole global superpowers, locking the world into a tense nuclear standoff that would dictate the next half-century.